Judge Mayfield was known for her firm rulings, and people often said she was hard as stone. She was fair on most days, but held strong opinions that sometimes clouded her judgment. Her reputation was that of a no-nonsense woman. One brisk Monday morning, the courtroom doors swung open and people shuffled in. Today's case wasn't a big one, at least, not in the eyes of Judge Mayfield. She scanned her docket and saw the name, Aaron Blake. The man was being fined for allegedly damaging property in an upscale neighborhood. Judge Mayfield quickly flipped through the file. Aaron was described as intimidating and troublesome by the complainant, a property manager named Mr. Carlson. As she looked up, her eyes narrowed when she saw Aaron walk into the room. There was a calmness to him, a quiet confidence. But Judge Mayfield had already formed her opinion. She assumed he was just another troublemaker trying to avoid responsibility. As Aaron took his place at the defendant's table, Judge Mayfield cleared her throat and looked him straight in the eyes. "Mr. Blake, I hope you understand the seriousness of this charge. You've been accused of property damage in an area with strict regulations," she began. Aaron remained calm, his expression polite and composed. "Your Honor, I believe there's been a misunderstanding," he said in a respectful tone. But Judge Mayfield wasn't having it. "I see no misunderstanding here. The evidence is clear," she replied firmly. "You're responsible for paying a fine of $10,000 to cover the damages." Aaron's brow furrowed slightly, but he stayed respectful. "Your Honor, with all due respect, I'd like the opportunity to explain. I had permission to be on the property for work, and I did not cause any damage." Judge Mayfield scoffed. "Permission? For what exactly, Mr. Blake? Are you suggesting you were there for legitimate business?" "Yes, Your Honor," Aaron replied patiently. "I was there to investigate a case for my work with the Department of Justice." Judge Mayfield's expression changed for a brief second, but she quickly hid her surprise. "The Department of Justice?" she repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, Your Honor. I'm a federal prosecutor," Aaron stated, holding her gaze. The courtroom grew silent. A few people gasped, and even the clerk paused mid-note. Judge Mayfield's eyes widened just a little before narrowing again. She wasn't about to let her authority slip. "Well, Mr. Blake," she said, her voice icy, "that doesn't change the fact that you are here today facing a fine. Regardless of your job, you are not above the law." Aaron nodded. "I understand, Your Honor. I fully believe in justice and fairness, which is why I'd like to bring forward evidence that clears my name. May I present my documents?" Judge Mayfield huffed, but waved her hand for him to proceed. Aaron opened his briefcase and handed a file to his attorney, who approached the judge's bench. As she flipped through the papers, her face grew paler. The documents were signed approvals, clearly showing that Aaron had been granted access to the property for an official investigation. Judge Mayfield's grip tightened around the file, but she wasn't ready to admit her mistake. "Regardless of these papers, Mr. Blake, you seem to have disregarded common courtesy. Were you or were you not aware of the neighborhood's concern for their property?" Aaron remained calm. "Your Honor, my work was handled respectfully. I can also provide witnesses who can testify to that." The judge hesitated, glancing at the courtroom as murmurs rose. She could feel the gaze of the spectators, curious about what she would do next. But she refused to back down easily. "This court will recess briefly," she announced. "I'll need time to review this new information." Aaron gave a slight nod, maintaining his respectful stance. But as Judge Mayfield left the room, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of justice he would receive. The truth was on his side, but would it be enough against someone as stubborn as Judge Mayfield? In the hallway, whispers filled the air. People who had come in to watch a simple case were now intrigued. "Did you hear?" someone whispered. "He's a federal prosecutor. This judge is about to be embarrassed big time." Yet, as Aaron sat down outside the courtroom, he simply waited, knowing that the truth would come to light one way or another. After a brief recess, Judge Mayfield re-entered the courtroom, her face stern and unreadable. She took her seat, shuffled some papers, and then looked up with a steady gaze, though a flicker of unease crossed her eyes. The spectators leaned forward, sensing something was brewing beneath her calm expression. "Mr. Blake," Judge Mayfield began, "I've reviewed the documents you submitted, but I'm not entirely convinced." She glanced at the paperwork, then raised her eyes to him. "There are still some unanswered questions." Aaron, who had remained composed, gave a respectful nod. "I understand, Your Honor. If there's anything I can clarify, I'm here to answer." Judge Mayfield hesitated, as if weighing her words. "While you've provided proof of permission, the property owner, Mr. Carlson, insists that you caused significant damage during your investigation. I don't take accusations of property damage lightly, especially in a neighborhood as prestigious as Riverstone Gardens." She leaned back, studying him, as if daring him to respond. Aaron took a breath, remaining calm but firm. "Your Honor, I'd like to call on 2 witnesses who were present with me that day, and they can confirm that no damage occurred. In fact, Mr. Carlson wasn't even on the property when we arrived. My investigation was routine, authorized, and properly documented." Judge Mayfield's lips tightened, and the room grew tense with anticipation. The idea of calling witnesses seemed reasonable to everyone else, but to her, it felt like a challenge. She was reluctant to allow a further delay, especially when she had already made up her mind. Yet, in a court where spectators were watching and Aaron's role as a federal prosecutor was now known, she had little choice but to proceed carefully. "Very well," she sighed, masking her frustration. "You may call your witnesses." The first witness was a young woman named Lisa Bennett, one of Aaron's team members, who stood confidently in the witness box. She spoke clearly, recounting how they had been careful on the property and conducted themselves professionally. She explained how they had documented every part of the investigation, even taking pictures to ensure no allegations of damage could be made against them. When Lisa finished, Judge Mayfield leaned forward. "And you're prepared to swear that no damage occurred whatsoever?" she asked pointedly. "Yes, Your Honor," Lisa replied without hesitation. "I was there the entire time." Aaron's attorney then called a second witness, an older man named Frank Woods, who was a longtime investigator with years of experience working on similar cases. He, too, confirmed that Aaron had acted professionally and with respect for the property, and that no one from Mr. Carlson's staff had been present to observe any alleged damage. Judge Mayfield shifted in her seat. The weight of evidence was clearly against her original judgment, and the courtroom sensed it. Yet, instead of acknowledging this, she began to question the witnesses further, almost as if she hoped to catch them in a misstep. But each answer from Lisa and Frank only reinforced Aaron's innocence. As the questioning continued, Mr. Carlson, the property owner, entered the room. He looked nervous, but held his chin high, determined to support his claims against Aaron. Once on the witness stand, he launched into a heated testimony, stating that he'd seen photos of damage, that his property was well maintained, and that he couldn't afford to let just anyone trample over his investments. Aaron's attorney stepped forward, showing a calm confidence. "Mr. Carlson, could you tell us what sort of damage you observed firsthand?" Mr. Carlson stammered, his gaze shifting uncomfortably. "Well, I didn't actually see it myself, but my assistant said." "Your assistant?" The attorney cut in, raising his eyebrows. "Is your assistant here today to confirm this?" Mr. Carlson cleared his throat. "No, they're not here today, but they showed me photos, and I trust them completely." The attorney nodded thoughtfully. "So, you're basing your testimony on second-hand information without having observed the damage yourself?" Mr. Carlson's face reddened. "I'm saying there was damage, and someone has to pay for it." Aaron's attorney calmly continued, "Mr. Carlson, Are you aware that Mr. Blake was there on an official investigation with permission from both your management company and the Department of Justice? Mr. Carlson's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The room was silent, all eyes on him, as he finally managed I wasn't aware of that, no. The judge looked visibly uncomfortable, the truth now settling in with undeniable clarity. The entire courtroom was beginning to see that not only was there a lack of proof against Erin, but also that this case had been riddled with assumptions. At that moment, Judge Mayfield realized that her judgment was crumbling. Her face grew tense as she cleared her throat, addressing the courtroom with an authoritative tone. "I have heard enough," she announced, struggling to keep her composure. "Mr. Blake, I apologize for any misunderstanding and misjudgment. Based on the evidence and testimonies provided, the case against you lacks sufficient grounds. You are free to go, and the charges are dismissed." Erin gave a respectful nod. "Thank you, Your Honor." But just as Judge Mayfield was about to dismiss the court, Erin's attorney spoke up. "Your Honor, given the nature of this case, we'd like to request that Mr. Carlson be investigated for making false claims without substantial evidence, which has wasted the court's time and unfairly tarnished my client's reputation." A murmur spread through the courtroom as Judge Mayfield paused, her face turning pale. The tables had truly turned, and now the one who had accused Erin faced the possibility of consequences. Judge Mayfield, caught off guard by the request, hesitated. She glanced at Mr. Carlson, who looked panicked, shifting in his seat as he felt the weight of his own accusations turning against him. Clearing her throat, Judge Mayfield nodded slowly. "Mr. Carlson, given the circumstances and in light of the evidence provided, I must agree that your actions warrant further investigation. Accusing someone without sufficient proof, particularly when they're conducting official duties, is a serious matter." Carlson's face went pale. "Your Honor, I didn't mean any harm. I just thought." But Judge Mayfield raised her hand, silencing him. "Belief without evidence has no place in this courtroom, Mr. Carlson. You brought these charges under false pretenses, and you wasted the time of this court and the reputation of a federal prosecutor." Erin watched silently, his face calm but determined. He had come to court prepared to defend himself, but hadn't expected justice to swing so quickly and clearly in his favor. With a final glance at Erin, Judge Mayfield made her decision. "I will be filing a recommendation to the district attorney's office to investigate Mr. Carlson for making fraudulent claims against a federal officer. Additionally, any costs Mr. Blake incurred for legal representation will be paid by Mr. Carlson." This court is adjourned. The gavel struck and the case was closed. The courtroom emptied quickly, whispers filling the air as spectators exchanged glances, each of them in awe of the swift and surprising turn of events. Erin collected his belongings, his face reflecting quiet relief. He exchanged a nod with his attorney, who clapped him on the shoulder with a grin. As they walked out of the courtroom, Erin couldn't help but smile. Justice had spoken louder than bias today, and he had been vindicated, all while maintaining his dignity. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd of onlookers and reporters had gathered, intrigued by the case's unexpected turn. One of the reporters called out to him, "Mr. Blake, any comment on the judge's decision?" Erin paused, looking out over the crowd. "Justice was served," he said simply. "Sometimes the truth needs only a little light to shine through." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving behind a courtroom where a lesson had been learned, a judge humbled, and a man's honor restored. This brings us to the end of the story. Thank you for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, don't hesitate to like the video and share it with your friends too. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell for more fascinating stories. Have a nice day.